our time together, that he does love you. But some men really simply do have a hard time saying the words, I love you. It means a lot to a man to say, I love you, unless he's a douchebag. It means that he's actually giving something away. It means he's making a commitment to you in some way, an emotional commitment. And I will say right now that if a man says, I love you too early in a relationship, and you're dating him and he says, I love you on the first date or something like that, that's actually a bad sign. We get emails all the time from women saying, Michael, I met this guy online. He told me he loves me on our very first date. He asked me to marry him 2 weeks later, etc. To me, that's actually a really bad sign. To me, that's a sign from men, from the guy, that he's desperate, that he's looking for a mom more than he's looking for a girlfriend or a wife and going from there. So if you're dealing with a guy who kind of did that, who came on to you so powerfully and said, I love you, I can't live without you, you are the air I breathe, you are the water I drink, right off the bat, to me, that's a bad sign. I'll also say that how often a guy says, I love you, isn't the important part either, and even the word love isn't the important part. The important part is that he is saying in some way, I adore you, I love you, you're great, at least a few times a month. Does he say, I love you? Does he say, I like you? Does he say, you're great? You know, with my own girlfriend, I often say, hey, honey, you're pretty awesome. That's kind of all I have to say sometimes. Or I adore you, or things like that. Not all guys are going to be verbal at all. Some guys have a really hard time with that. But is he giving you a verbal indication at some point in your relationship, once, twice, 3 times, 5 times a month, 10 times a month, that he likes you, that he respects you, that he likes having you around? Does he make these tiny little indicators? So here's what I want you to do. If he does do that, if he says, I love you, or I adore you, or I like you, or whatever it's going to be, on your little piece of paper, give yourself a point right now. If he doesn't do that, don't give yourself a point. Don't worry, it doesn't mean he doesn't love you, necessarily. It just means maybe he's not that verbal. But let's go on from there. Number 2, does he make you a priority in his life? A priority in his life. Now, it's important to note, I did not say, does he make you the priority in his life? Like I like to say, actions speak louder than words, and it's harder to lie with your body. And what I'm saying here is not that you should be the absolute number 1 priority for a guy. If that's what you want in a relationship, you're either never going to find it, or you're going to be with a guy who you're going to lose respect for. And the way this happens usually is that a woman will find a guy who he does make her his number 1 priority. He is obsessed with her. He will do anything she says, essentially. Make sure that she's happy all the time. And usually within a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year, 5 years, she finds herself horribly unattracted to him because he's not living like a man at that point. He doesn't have a mission. He doesn't have a drive. In my own relationship, my girlfriend, I adore her. I love her. I want her to be in my life forever. But she knows that in my life, my top 3 priorities tend to be my business, my writing, things I do, taking care of myself, and music, and then her. And which one is number 1 kind of shifts on any given day. It might be that I'm really focused on work. It might be that I'm really focused on some of my hobbies. It might be that I'm really focused on her. And it goes up and down as time goes on. But you should be in his top 3 priorities. Right? And the way he's going to show you that you're in his top 3 priorities is usually by doing small little things for you, usually without being asked. Now, if you're going up to a guy and saying, hey, honey, will you help me with this? And you're having to ask all the time, those aren't the indicators we're talking about here. What we're talking about are the little things he might do just because to help make your life easier in some way. Things like starting your car, making dinner, going to a function he hates because you like it, marking out time in his schedule for you, the occasional little gift just because, opera or Oprah, maybe watching Oprah with you, things like that. Now, what it's going to be is going to vary drastically depending on who the guy is and what kind of relationship you have. But does he just do these little tiny things? And I'm not saying grand gestures. We'll talk about grand gestures in a second. But little tiny things, not all the time, but if a guy loves you, he'll make you number 1 at least sometimes. At least 20% of the time. He's going to mark off and say, you know what? My girlfriend, my wife, she needs me here. I want to make her feel really good. And talking about grand gestures really briefly, you will meet these guys who will do things like, hey, I'm going to buy you a ridiculous diamond ring. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do all these other incredibly elaborate kind of things. To me, those grand gestures are less about your relationship and are more about him trying to prove something to the world. They're nice sometimes. It's really nice on an anniversary. It's really nice on a birthday. to have something really grand like that. But the thing that, to me, that really shows love are those little tiny actions during the day, during the week, during life, during the doldrums of life. Does he make a little bit of time for you? Okay? So if you can say yes to that he makes you one of his top 3 priorities, give yourself 1 point. If he doesn't do that, don't give yourself a point. Okay? So that's the first 2. Number 3, does he tell his friends about you and show you off? Does he tell his friends about you and show you off? Basic question, have you met his best friends and his family? Do his best friends and his family know about you? We get emails again all the time from women saying, I'm with this guy, we have sex sometimes, we date, he seems really into me, but I've never met his brother, I've never met his best friend. He won't be my friend on Facebook. He won't make me his girlfriend on Facebook. Things like that. If you're with a guy who is separating you from the rest of his life, there's something fishy going on. Either he's quote-unquote ashamed of you in some way, or he's hiding something, or he might be a little bit abusive emotionally or otherwise. He might be controlling in some way. In my experience, a man who is in love wants to show his woman off. A man who's in love wants everyone to see the woman that he is in love with. He looks at you with adoration. He wants everyone else to look at you with adoration as well. So again, if you are being siloed, as I call it, by a guy, if you're with a guy who is not intermingling you with his general life, things like that, to me, that's a bad sign. It might be that he has feelings for you. It might be that he likes you a lot, but to me, that's not love. To me, controlling behavior is actually the opposite of love, and siloing behavior like that is the opposite of love. Okay? So if you can say yes to that, you get 1 point. And if you can't say yes to that, you get no points at all. Number 4. Does he care about your pleasure during sex? Yeah, we're going to talk about sex for a second. Basic question, is he 100% focused on himself, or does he care about your pleasure? Right? Now, sex, some women will say, oh, sex isn't the most important thing in a relationship. I personally disagree. Sex is an incredibly important component of a relationship. And sex is oftentimes how men show connection with a woman, if they're doing it right. Now, sex can get complicated. We could do a whole other call on what really goes through men's minds during sex, about men's fantasies, about the problem that some men fall into sometimes, where they have a hard time reconciling the really dirty fantasies they may have in their mind with the woman they actually love, with the woman they actually care about, with the woman who is the mother of their children, who they want to grow old with, for things like that. But basic question, is he 100% focused on himself, or does he care about your pleasure? And here's a big one. Does he ever open his eyes while you're making love? Does he ever just look you right in the eye while you're having sex? Or is his eyes always kind of closed? Does he always seem kind of distant? Does it seem like you're basically in bed with a stranger in some weird sort of way? And I'm sure this is actually raising some flags for some women who are on this call who are saying, yeah, I've kind of had that problem, actually going on from there. So 1 point if yes, no points if no. Okay? Number 5, does he respect you and encourage you? Right? Now let's talk about the word respect. Respect is a powerful word in this context. What I mean by respect is, does he value your opinion? Do you share important decisions? And does he treat you like a partner instead of like an accessory? Also, does he encourage you to have friends, interests, and passions outside the relationship? Jealousy is not love, so it's easy to get confused. You certainly want a guy who cares about you and does feel to some degree protective of you. You are, quote unquote, his in some way, things like that. But a lot of women fall into the trap of thinking, oh, he's so jealous, he's so controlling, he doesn't want me to go out with other people, he doesn't want me to be friends with my ex-boyfriend, he doesn't want me to be friends with any guy whatsoever. And they mistake that for love. That's not love. That's controlling, douchebaggy behavior. A man that really loves you is going to be in your corner. A man that really loves you is going to celebrate you. A man that really loves you is going to feel like he wants you to have the greatest amount of success and happiness possible. Now, that might mean sometimes that he doesn't get to spend as much time with you as you want, or that you go off and do things that in some way might be you having a quote-unquote separate life from him in some ways. But this is a good thing. Jealousy is not love, though it's easy to get confused. As I say, if you're in a relationship with a guy who feels like you have to clear him every time you do something, things like that, that's not love to me. That's